are we're 22 neighborhoods in the city of Boston, 351 cities and towns across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and 7 continents around the world. www.bostonpraiseradiotv.co. So that's how you can see us. You can also go through the 31 media outlets. I'm not going to go through all of them. Just go on the website. You'll be able to see how you can tune into us and hear news from us, about us, for us, and look like us, so that we can educate, motivate, inspire one another. I'm so excited to be back here again. Election was something else. Boy, Dunk the Vote was out there knocking on doors. Well, not knocking on doors. I ain't gonna say knocking on doors. We were dropping lit, canvassing cars, and we were able to hit various neighborhoods on the ground. That's right, on the ground, where we were in Milton, Massachusetts, where I reside because of the 12th Suffolk, and we were also in Dorchester, Cobden Square area, Mattapan, Randolph with an F, Stoughton, Brockton. So we're all over the place on the ground. Some parts of Roxbury. We were just trying to help these candidates out, get the vote up. We just wanted to get the vote up and dunk the vote, nonpartisan. So, we were able to do that on the ground. Also at Milton Access TV, they were running our interviews that we did right here at Boston Black News. The candidates, of course, was Javon Lissette, Stephanie Everett, and our winner, Brandy Fluker Oakley, the winner of the 12th Suffolk. So we were playing their interviews and their broadcasts. Milton did an excellent job playing the stuff that we did here. The broadcast that we did here, they were able to play that ongoing, so that the areas of Milton that we've just focused on the ground and precincts, I believe 10-1 and that area on 138, but we were able to shoot out that information all day long at Milton, in the Milton community, 12 Suffolk. And I kind of like sell ourselves short sometimes, because I forget we're everywhere on the air here at Boston Praise Radio TV. On one side, 31 media outlets, and on the other side, Boston Black News. So we were hitting everybody. Wow. So we're in 2 places at the same time, 3 places at the time, 4 places at the same time, really trying to get out the vote. And we were handing out mass vote and NAACP literature. We didn't have any money at Dunk the Vote, so we just said, we'll just go ahead and hand out your thousands of literature so people can have information. Thank you, Cheryl Crawford and Tanisha Sullivan. This is really a nice piece that they gave out, how to vote in the 2020 primary election, voting by mail, vote in person. And then on the other side, we can keep that, because now this is no longer here. The primary is over. We have the other side where it's the 2020 census, and you can complete it online, my2020census.gov, or phone 1-844-330 2020. And of course, you can register to vote. Dunk the Vote. How to register or update your registration, visit registertovotema.com. The general election, early voting now. Make sure you pay attention, because things have changed. Some of you may have realized that some of the polling locations were changed due to COVID. So you make sure you step on top of this. And here at Boston Black News, we're able to give you that information, whether it be here on Fridays, whether it be on Civic Engagement Hour with Priscilla Flint Banks and Pastor Hobbs on Tuesday evenings at 6 p.m. or any of the stations, because we're going to really drive it home, because we want to make sure we have record turnout numbers in the general election. So the early voting, October 17th to October 30th. Election day is November 3rd. Get them out! That's right, we got to get him out. Now, him, we know what him is. It doesn't mean just one person. Get them all out. Anyway, mail ballots must be postmarked by election day. Get him out. That's what we were saying as we get. I'm telling you, it was incredible, Brother Eric. When we were out there, folks were walking by. Sometimes you're handing out, and I understand because of COVID, they didn't want to touch it, but we had on our gloves and our PPP gear. They were like, oh, no. And I said, get them out. And they were like, oh, yeah, let me get one of them. So it was really a motivating factor for all those out here, pounding the pavement and doing the work. To say, get them out, like that'll get their attention. I'm really excited about today's broadcast. I have a good friend of mine, brother, that worked with me in the Patrick administration. He ran for city council at large. He is a political wonk. policymaker. He's the brother that helps out the brothers behind the wall. I'm really excited to have David Halbert here with us. Good morning, my brother.
Hey, good morning, man. Thank you so much for having me. Great
yeah, man. Oh, so let's talk about this election. I mean, I forgot what it was, because I was roaming around and I seen you on a Zoom and I asked you a particular question, but I won't go there because I want you. You're ready to get flexed up already.
We can go there in a little bit.
Okay, we're going to other
stuff to get to first.
Okay, let's go there. What do you think? What is your analysis of what went on Tuesday, election day?
I mean, it was unique, obviously. I think that the circumstances that we're in with the pandemic, with COVID, the expansion of vote by mail, it was something where and I consider myself, a progressive, an activist that way, but we didn't see the kind of gains overall that we wanted to see in terms of new folks coming in and bringing new voices in the totality of things, but we did see progress,
right?
And that's a good thing. And we saw an expansion of the number of people of color that are going to be in the legislature next year, which is great. We talked about what happened in the 12th Suffolk District right there. That's a net pickup for the community, but also there was a pickup you probably saw in Lowell, where Representative Nangle went down in his primary to a Cambodian war refugee, which is powerful stuff.
Big time.
Somebody who's worked in Middlesex County and knows what that means in that community. We saw out in West Springfield, Senator Jim Welch. He went down to Adam Gomez, the city councilor in Springfield. So we're seeing more representation. It's not enough. We know that the numbers in the legislature do not match the numbers on the ground from a demographic basis for Massachusetts. So we still need to see more effort and work there. But we saw progress, and progress is a good thing. The other thing I think we saw, and put the truth to the lie, is all the folks, folks like yourself, folks that we've been friends with, that we've worked with, who've talked about the things that we need to do to increase voter enfranchisement, same day voter registration.
Powerful.
Right? Ranked choice voting, what that can mean. I mean, we look at the 4th Congressional District and what happened there, and it was just called.
And it's still.
I think AP just called it.
Did it
for
just,
Auchincloss? Yeah,
he won.
That's the last I saw.
You sure?
That's the last I saw.
Is that fact check? Can we fact check that?
And I believe that he's going out to Newton City Hall to talk to reporters.
So Jessie, who worked in the administration,
she did.
So she
close. It was very close.
It was, how many votes was it?
I think
I know it was a 500 or something.
Yeah, it was a very small number.
Wow.
And there was an interesting stat somebody ran, which said in the last 3 open seat contested congressional primaries. So we're talking about the Mass 4th that just happened.
Right.
We're talking about the Mass 3rd up in Lowell, where it's Congresswoman Lori Trahan right now.
Right.
And then in the Mass 5th, where it's Catherine Clark. In all 3 of those races in the Democratic primary, the winner didn't even get, I believe, 30%.
Wow.
And those people are in Congress now. And it's no slight on any of them who are in, or Jake and whatever with him. It's just that when we're talking about things like ranked choice voting and why it's important, this is why. Because you can use the Mass 4th as a perfect example. Yes, the most number of people of that whole group voted for Jake, but if we go through and we look at how other candidates were coming through, other candidates were jumping on for Jesse, there's a strong case to be made that somebody else, if you had a system like ranked choice voting, would be the congressperson. And that we know that enfranchises disenfranchised groups, that enfranchises communities of color, that enfranchises women as candidates. So we need to be doing more than that. But I think the most powerful thing that came out of this was the impact of being able to just mail in ballots and do it early. And we saw a record turnout. That's something that we as a community, as activists, as people who are engaged, should want to make permanent, so that we can give people as much opportunity to cast their ballots, to have their voices heard, as effectively as possible. We're not breaking ground here, right? There's states like Oregon that have been doing this for years. So we know what to do. And now that we've seen not only that we can do it, but that it works and that it has this kind of positive impact, we need to expand that. And by the way, we need to expand it not just for state level and federal level elections. We need to have this exact same template for municipal elections. We got a big mayor's race coming up next year. And we know if we have the ability to have more people, particularly more people from our community, engaged in the process and not only limited to showing up just on election day, that's going to have a different impact on the conversation and ultimately on the policies that get put forward from City Hall.
Yeah, I paid a lot of attention in District 12, Suffolk, with Javon Lissette, Stephanie Everett, and Brandy Fluker Oakley, all 3 black attorneys, which was incredible for them to really activate that base. Now, Mattapan has traditionally been moving up. Actually, in the past couple elections, the turnout has gone up. It's been really good as far as Ward 18 and I believe 14 and a couple other wards down there. But I was really excited about that, and it was clean. It was really a clean race. There was no mudslinging. It wasn't, name calling and being very negative, which turns a lot of folks off, unlike the Senate race. I want to talk to you about that. I did not particularly like what was I seen. There were people complaining to me about it, and although they had two outstanding young senior advisors in Reverend Willie Broderick and Jaquetta Van Zandt, they were incredible as far as getting out the vote, and particularly in the Black community, Latino community. They were, we had them here at Boston Black News. It was just really exciting to see, because we need more people besides us in there.
Absolutely. I think what we saw in the Senate race that just happened, and like you said, Pastor Broderick, Jaquetta, Ramon Soto. I mean, there were a lot of good people involved on both sides. Now, I personally, put out there, I voted for Ed Markey. I supported him, but to your point, I was personally a little bit turned off by some of the things I saw, particularly online. Right, which was that I get people had some frustrations about Congressman Kennedy running and why he ran and not really feeling it, and for me, that was the big tipping point for me. Right, I didn't feel that the case was made as strongly as it could have been to make the shift, and that's okay, but it didn't have to go any further than that. You can simply make a choice to vote for somebody else, and you don't have to dunk on somebody, you don't have to call them out of their name, you don't have to talk about their family, you don't have to. I'm often said, both in my race and previous races, because I think we both come from some of that tradition, which is you can be opponents in a race, but you don't have to be enemies. There's a difference to that. It's a big difference. Right? This is a competitive environment. It's a competitive endeavor, and that is okay, and it should be a competition of ideas, a competition of visions, things like that. But if you aren't making it personal, there's no need to make it personal. We're all people. We're all children of God. That's what's important. And I think I look to myself, and I talk to some of my friends about this, which is the question I have is beyond just what the final vote number is, right? The question is, because this is a primary, technically, I'm a member of the Democratic State Committee. Once 801 hits on primary day, it's all over. Right. And so we're supposed to be able to come back together. And I know for me personally, I can look at each and every one of my friends who were on Congressman Kennedy's side in this race and have a civil conversation with them because of the way in which I comported myself, the way they comported themselves with me. And, we can be civil. We can be professionals about it. Right. And, and I wonder if that is a sentiment that is shared by a lot of people.
Well, I think, David, you raised a good point. I think with the new generation, the millennials and some of us baby boomers who have good upbringing, it's just having common decency and respect for one another. I was really turned off by some of the things I was hearing from black folks against black folks. I was like, wait a second.
We got to build each other up.
We got to look out. We already got enough stuff going against us. We don't need to be tearing each other down for candidates that don't even look like us. So my thing is like, listen, if you're going to get involved and stay positive about it so that we can make sure we set an example for our young ones.
Absolutely. And I think it's this, I don't even want to put it just on the generational divide, although there is something very significant there. Right. I'll say this, we live in, and we're buffeted all around us, right, by a hot take culture. Right. That immediate, Twitter, Instagram, we want that reaction in the moment. Right. And I think, for those of us who may be a little bit older than some folks, I will give you that generational piece. But sometimes you just need to take that beat. You've had it. Yeah. I've had it. Everybody in the studio and probably listeners had it. Those moments where you've been ready to hit send, you on that email, pick up the phone, make that call, and you had something speak to you that said maybe you just want to take a minute. Yeah. And for me,
mine is the Holy Spirit.
There it is.
There you go. Because that's what keeps me balanced.
And amen. And it's the truth. It's that I think if we would be better served as a community, as a culture, generally, if more people took that extra second to say, do I really need to say that? Sometimes you do. Right. Sometimes things need to be called out. Right. Sometimes they need to be called out publicly in the moment.
If it's the truth, let's go ahead and say it.
But the question I always ask myself is, what's the goal? What's this serving from me saying this? Yeah. Is it in service to pushing forward an agenda? Is it in service to helping other people? Is it in service to making things better? Or is it just to make myself feel good? Right. And I think if we use that as the lens through which we view a lot of our actions, we'd see a lot less of this kind of vitriol, hate, and once again, you can be passionate about what it is you believe, what you are doing and why you're doing. You should be, particularly if you're working for a candidate, right? Because you're certainly probably not doing it to get rich, as you and I both know. Oh, no. But, that passion doesn't have to turn into, this kind of burning fire of hatred and you're an evil person. No, you're just different and have a different opinion, and it can be that, and that's okay.
Right. Well, I do want to circle back around the generational gap, because that It's something that I've identified with as far as like I see like the baby boomers, I see the millennials, the generation X, Y, Z, and so forth, millennials. There are different strategies. There's not one strategy. If the baby boomers are doing it this way or have done it this way and they're good at it, let's acknowledge that. If the millennials are doing, whether it be protesting, let's acknowledge, let's just bring all that together, because I know for a fact that if all of these different groups came together, we would definitely build a true democracy. What do you think about that?
I think so, but I also think that, where you're at in your life dictates how you see the world.
Yeah.
Right? I'm here sitting on the cusp of 40,
right.
And I'm married with 2 children.
Now, married with 2 children.
Married with 2 children. And,
right. And I'm sitting here 57 with a 4-year-old grandson.
There you go.
And a 20-year-old son.
But you see things differently. You as a grandfather see
right.
things differently than me as a father. And
exactly.
both of us looking back to our younger selves,
right.
You have a different set of priorities, a different set of obligations in your world. And so that dictates how you interact with the world in so many different ways.
Right.
That's important. The things that you value, the work that you do, and why you do it. Right. And so it's important. I think it's that we need to have that conversation. And for me, I think you get more when you root that conversation in values.
Right.
Right. Because whether you're, a little bit younger, a little bit older, whether you're single, whether you're married, whether you're a parent, whether you're not, what have you, if the values are largely the same in terms of wanting to see people uplifted,
right.
Wanting to see equity and equality, wanting to see opportunity for all people, whatever. The approach, as you said, might be a little bit different, but the end goal, hopefully, should be relatively the same, ideally. And so, I think that's really important as we're having these conversations. And look, it's going to be messy.
Right.
That's how policy gets made. That's politics. That's government. It is a messy endeavor. Right. And I think people watch a little too much West Wing and think it's going to be nice and clean. You're going to wrap it up in an hour. That's not how it is. Right. It is conversations. It is, many times it's compromise. Right, and people, and that's
compromise and competition.
Compromise and competition. Right?
Yeah. Now, speaking of competition, I'm sitting here. I can't wait to ask this question, and I'm looking at you. Yeah, that's right. I'm going to ask you, right?
Well, where I got the shirt, I got online. It's good.
You got on black. Okay, all right, but you had your black mask. But I'm going to ask you, what are you going to do as far as your political career? I'm going to be straight out because you ran a very good campaign. City council at large, you made it to the finals, and I said, this brother has so much potential. I know he has good stock. He worked with me. What do you plan on doing? Because guess what? I want to see you in office.
Oh, well, thank you. First off, thank you.
Man,
and by the way, thank you. And that means a lot coming from you.
Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you to all the people who I got not just to vote for me last year, but who I got to meet and who touched my life, and who hopefully I touched theirs a little bit as well. As far as what the future holds for me, look, we know what the conversation is about next year, what the landscape might look like, and I'm in conversation, and yes, I am seriously considering putting my hat back in the ring, but it's a conversation that, as you said, to those different stages and seasons in your life, I am a husband, I am a father. My first and highest priority is to the 3 women who are sitting at home right now.
That's right.
At my house. And so it's having that conversation of, is this something that works not just for me and not just in terms of what I think I hopefully can provide as a continuation of my life of public service, but also is it something that is good for our family?
Right.
Because last year, as anybody who's been involved in a campaign, you sacrifice a lot as a candidate, as a staff member, right? Not just about the candidate. It's not just about the candidate.
Right.
And I say to folks, particularly folks who are married, who are in relationships, that probably the hardest job in a campaign, honestly, is a candidate's partner or spouse.
That's right.
Because that's somebody who hopefully cares deeply about you, wants to see the best for you, believes the best in you, and has to sit in many ways often on the sidelines and watch as people are saying things good and bad about you, and having to deal with that, and also having to see you in your moments of fragility, in your moments where you might be a little bit more vulnerable than you can put out there on a public face, and try to be there for you and support you. And by the way, in the case of our household, also hold it down with 2 little girls. Right. My girls were 1 and 4 when I was running for the most part. And so my wife is the hero of my campaign in so many ways.
Right. The CEO.
Absolutely. And so, for me, it's that conversation. But yes, there have been having conversations with other folks who've reached out to me. And I thank each and every one of them for, believing me and believing that I do have something that I can provide and give to this city.
Right.
And it's a decision, obviously, we know the wheels keep turning, they move quickly. So it's something I'm hoping to make a decision on in the very near future. And so if, folks want to connect, please feel free.
Keep me posted.
Feel free. David@davidhalbert.com is still open. But in all seriousness, for me, it really goes back to the reason I ran in the first place, which was was, it's not enough to see your name on a poster or your picture somewhere.
Right.
It's got to be about, is this a role where you can help other people?
Right.
Is this a role where you can use the talents and the skills that God's provided for you and put those into practice so that you can uplift others, so that you can provide opportunities for others? Because at the end of the day, you're going to leave office if you get elected, right? And you have to be able to look back and look over the body of work that you've done and say, have I done for others? Have I helped more than just myself? Has it been more than just my own self-promotion, my own, gaining and grabbing? Has it really been about opening doors for others? Has it been about extending a hand and lifting others up? Has it been about providing for those who are in their time of need? And so if you can answer those questions and say, that is what I want to do, that is why I want to do it, and this is how I want to do it, then I think you are ready to make that decision and make that leap.
So let's talk about what you're doing now. You are at MIT, the Educational
Justice Institute.
Okay, give the brother a chance. I just got out the hospital yesterday.
That's true, and I'm glad to see you here.
Yeah, so I'm a little slow this morning, but I'm gonna be all right. I'm gonna be all right. So tell us a little bit about that MIT, what you're doing over there. I know you was working and with what's his name? Peter Katusian,
Middlesex Sheriff's Office.
Yep. Tell us a little bit that journey, because that's important, because some of the things that we're doing here at Boston Black News, dealing with returning citizens, some of the work we're doing with Dunktiville, which we've been doing for 30 years, dealing with returning citizens. When I heard you was doing that when you ran for city council at lot, I was like, I didn't know where you had landed after the Patrick administration. Tell us that journey and how that got you involved, city councilor, and where you're at now. Can you just kind of tell us that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so as you said, you and I worked together. I was there for the first year of the administration. It's still one of the privileges and honors of my life to be able to consider myself a part of that administration with Governor Patrick. And then after that, I went to City Hall, worked for Sam Yoon, as you might remember, John Tobin. So, shout out to my buddies out there, since gone on to wonderful new endeavors. And then following that, I left at the Middlesex Sheriff's Office, which, had you asked me before if I would ever have a significant portion of my career in any kind of public safety, law enforcement, I would have just kind of looked at you and blinked, right? But just the moves in mysterious ways, and I was put in that place, and I ended up being there for 7.5 years, and saw a lot in terms of the corrections. Really, unfortunately, in many cases, the corrections industry in parts of this country, less so here, but there are still elements of that. And so, people who were doing good work, trying to help others. It's interesting. I remember we ran a summer camp program for youth. Okay. And there were some young boys out one day, and they were talking, and we were just waiting for somebody to show up, and they were chatting with me, and they said, you guys punish people because you guys run the jail and you guys run the prisons. Right. And I said, no. I said, that's not our job, right? If we're doing our job the right way. The punishment is that you don't have your freedom, right? You just happen to be with us, right? We didn't make that decision in the sheriff's offices. Our job is to provide those individuals who are incarcerated with the kind of programs and services that these people need in order to leave and never come back. Right. And if people don't ever walk through the doors of any correctional facility again, then that correctional facility has done its job. Right. Right. And that's very important because, and I give Sheriff Katusian credit for this, and I'm sure you picked it up from somebody else, don't repeat it, but the saying that he had that always sticks with me is the vast majority of people who are incarcerated are not bad people. That's right. They're people who simply made a bad choice at a moment in their life. Say that again, Dave. Right? And that is important to remember. And so, I carry that work through, and following the election last year, the co-director of our program, somebody I'd worked with at the sheriff's office in Middlesex, and she reached out to me. We had a conversation, and I came on board to this program that has been there for about 3 years now in the role of outreach manager. So my job is really this. It's talking about the work that we're doing and bringing in all those elements together. And it's important because, as we know, if you don't come from a community where you have a high number of returning citizens or people who have been incarcerated, if you as somebody personally or within your family or social circles don't really know a lot of people, it's very easy to, because those facilities are literally behind a wall, concrete and razor wire, to not think about it. It is the classic out of sight, out of mind thing. And so what we do at TEGI is, multifaceted. So first, our primary focus is how do we expand educational opportunities for particularly around college level education opportunities for people who are incarcerated. So our other co-director is a longtime member of the faculty at MIT, has taught for over 30 years, Dr. Lee Perlman, in facilities. So he's taught at MCI Norfolk, he's taught at Concord. Right now he's actually teaching courses at the South Bay House of Correction. So shout out to Sheriff Tompkins for being an engaged partner in that, he and his staff and his team, and we greatly appreciate that. And the interesting thing is the classes that he teaches are blended classes. Wow. So you have half of incarcerated students and half MIT students, right? And these MIT students are some of the...
So is it online now? Or is it...
Right now it is. Okay. Typically, it's actually inside the facility.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah, and I hope everybody who's listening takes a moment to go to our website. So it's teji.mit.edu.
Okay.
And take a look at our website. That was one of my first big projects, getting our website redesigned. But if you go to the bottom, there's a video, and it's called Redemption. And it's a video that WGBH produced last year about Dr. Perlman, his courses, and what was going on inside. It actually just won a New England Emmy earlier this year. So we're incredibly proud of that. But it speaks to the power of this work.
Wow.
And it's the power on both sides, right? Because of the work that we do and the focus, and people tend to say, okay, it's just about the inmates. And it's really about both groups. For the incarcerated students, right? It's about giving them the opportunity to say, hey, you know what? You are a person of value, and you have the ability academically and the talent to compete and to persist in this work, right? And do this and have this kind of college level education with some of the brightest, most brilliant minds out there, these students at MIT.
What age group are we looking at? I mean, do you see a lot of young people, and is it mostly black men? Is it Latino men?
Mostly it's South Bay. It's mostly black and Latino, primarily. But we also work not just with the men. We work with the women as well.
Okay.
So and this class that Dr. Perlman's running right now actually is a blended online class. So we have a group of MIT students. We have male incarcerated students and female incarcerated students, which usually you don't have male and female incarcerated students together.
Okay.
Right. So the technology piece has actually allowed us to have a little more flexibility.
Okay.
It doesn't, don't get it twisted. It doesn't replace in-person instruction.
That's right.
That's the gold standard, right? And that's what every faculty member wants. But with the pandemic, you go back to the Department of Corrections and many of our sheriff's offices, they shut down everything back in around March and April, right? So they're shutting down contact visits, they're shutting down visitation, they're shutting down all the visits from faculty members, from volunteers and things like that, and moving to lockdown, right? So people are in their cells 23 and a half hours a day in some cases. And that's everybody through the entire facility, which is usually restrictive housing limited to a very small population. And we're excited because the Department of Corrections has said people can get back in at around September 28th to start instructing. We're glad that we're able to get back in through these virtual classes in places like South Bay, but it changes the game, right? And so the work that we're doing, I think it's so important because we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to maintain that continuity of education for people so we're not disrupting their educational attainment. But even more importantly, we understand that particularly at our county level institutions like South Bay, Middlesex, and other sheriff's offices, people just aren't there that long. You can't get a college degree in the 280, 300-day stay that a lot of people have.
So is that the time frame that they normally stay, 200?
It's around there, depending on the facility. Now, at the state level, Department of Correction, for those who don't know, if you're sentenced to 2.5 years or less, typically go to a county level facility, House of Correction.
Okay.
At the jail is where you are when you're actually in the trial process. And then if it's a more serious crime, a higher level of sentencing, you typically go to the state. So MCI Norfolk, MCI Concord, the state prisons, right? And then the state prisons actually, in some ways, a little bit easier to have your educational opportunities happen because of the simple fact that you're there longer. And so, we are very focused on that and making sure that we wrap these educational programs not just into what's happening inside the facility, but also as we're thinking about it and trying to work with our partners to make sure that education is a key component of reentry. Because, and here's a fact that is, I think, powerful and important. Incarcerated students, those who receive educational opportunities while they are incarcerated, are 43% less likely to recidivate and go back in.
Wow.
43%. That's
man.
Huge. And
That's
even if you are a law and order, cut and dry kind of a thing, person about that, you should be supporting education programs in correctional facilities, because if you can cut the number of people going back in half, that's dollars and cents. That's real money that you can put towards education, towards infrastructure, towards all these other needs that we know are out there.
Right.
So education in facilities is a really important thing, and that's why we do the work that we do. And for those who, once again, want to go and check out our website. It's teji.mit.edu.
Okay. And we're going to put that on the screen.
Oh, great. Thank you so much.
Definitely. You mentioned the pandemic, and what's going on with all these black men getting killed. What's your response to that?
I mean, it's one of those things where there's a part of me that's been around a little bit that, I'm glad to see people focusing, although I wish we didn't have to focus on this.
Okay.
And I see the energy that was there at the beginning, right? We saw, people like Monica Cannon Grant organizing and getting people in the streets and demanding change. We saw groups like the Mass Black and Latino Legislative Caucus, our state representative here, Russell Holmes, people like Liz Miranda and others, promoting this kind of legislation. But we also are seeing concurrently now that we're a few months, later, we're getting closer to the beginning of the school year, things like that. Some of that energy starting to seep out. Some of that energy starting to dissipate. And, it's been brought up sadly by what we just saw in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Right. And Jacob Blake. And it's terrible that is what re-energizes.
They had him handcuffed to the bed.
Paralyzed. And meanwhile, somebody else can walk right by, as we all saw, with a gun right on their shoulder after they shot 2 people. And
then you hear about the 43% returning citizens coming back in and out, what you just mentioned, right?
The lower recidivism rate, yes.
Right?
Yep.
But the bottom line, some of these brothers, a lot of them brothers are innocent, right? Is that true? I mean,
I think that...
I've known a lot of folks that went to prison and they're innocent. And so when I see these high numbers, I see the racial profiling, I see the black men being lynched publicly on TV, and it's like business as usual. Does that,
you can't be involved, you can't be aware of what's going on in our society and not see the disparate and disproportionate impact. And
really?
Particularly on black and brown communities, particularly on black men. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But remember, one of the other lessons that I learned from working at the sheriff's office is this: when people are incarcerated, it's not just them that goes in.
Right.
It's them, it's their family, it's their communities.
Come on.
Right. We're taking more into each and every one of those facilities each and every time. And so every part of that has its role in society, of course. But you can't look at, and one of the things that drives me up a wall is when I see these people online who are like, well, white people get killed by cops too. And it's like, yeah, but that population is 3 times the size of our population.
Exactly.
So there's no way that our numbers should be the same. And it's structural. It's structural. There isn't a reliable, publicly created and maintained database on police-involved shootings nationally. Right? That's insane. That should be something that, whether it's Department of Justice, whether it's National Institutes of Public Health, CDC, because for us, it's a public health issue.
Exactly.
And just as much as it's a public safety issue. These types of things, and me, right? You said I'm a wonk. I like data. I like information, that kind of thing. But if you were obscuring our ability to even get accurate information, then we're not going to have it. I listen to, and I try to listen to not just the people who agree with me, people who don't disagree with me as well. Right. And one of the things
me.
Yeah. And, and I'm a big podcast junkie. So one of the podcasts I listen to is the National Review, big conservative, classic conservative editorial board podcast, just to hear what the other side is saying.
Exactly.
And to hear them talk about issues around racial justice, hear them talk about issues around police-involved shootings, and there's this vision that folks on that side tend to put out that says, oh, well, the statistics say that it is equal, and that there's this false narrative about communities being impacted, and police-involved shootings and other aspects of the state being involved in a negative way in our communities. The truth of the matter, though, which you and I and most people I imagine listening to this know, is that those stats are a small window, and that if you expand that out, for every story that gets reported, for every piece of data that gets filed, there's probably 5 or 10 that never see the light of day. And that the impact that is happening in communities, particularly communities that have had historically tense relations with law enforcement, with public safety, whatever else, those relationships, those stories are so much bigger.
Right.
They're much bigger than even in a report, as somebody who is about data. But we have to, at the very least, get that data in order to make it happen. That's why it was so important when we were talking last year, folks like Rasan Hall and Tito and so many others.
The racial profiling press conference, right?
Out in front of the State House talking, and you and I were there, talking about why we needed to get that data on traffic stops.
Right.
Because, once again, if we can't quantify it, if we can't put real hard numbers on it, it makes it so much easier to dismiss and disregard our very real concerns and our very real, struggles as a community.
617-282-0865. 617-282-0685. We're going to open up the lines. We want to make sure we hear from our community. We want to hear from you, Eric. You had a question.
Yes. Brother David, what do you think is contributing to the uptick of colleges and universities getting involved in returning citizens? I mean, you have schools like Emerson that are getting involved, Tufts, Northeastern, Suffolk. Why is this whole uptick of colleges and universities getting involved in
I think part of it is that we're at a new moment in terms of civil rights, racial justice, racial awareness writ large, and I want to see that energy continue. But it's interesting you should bring up those schools in particular. So one of the programs that we administer through TEGI, where I am, at MIT, is a program called the Massachusetts Prison Education Consortium. And it's a program where we're working with Emerson, with Tufts, with Northeastern, and many other schools in order to streamline and connect educational practitioners who are operating correctional facilities across the state, so that we have things like streamlined credit transfer, so that we're reducing all the obstacles that students have in terms of the getting courses and putting together the kind of educational plan that they want to have internally, and then bringing that with them externally. And one of the things and one of the animating principles behind that is the fact that there are more schools that are getting involved and taking it, on themselves to be engaged this way. I think for us, at MIT, and I think it's mirrored by a lot of our partners, it's this: we want to do the work to allow these, young men and women who are on our campuses to see themselves and engage themselves not just as students, and in terms of MIT as a very technical school, not just to see themselves as physicists or engineers or architects, but really as members of a global society. And that's why I think the value and the importance and the power and impact of the work that we're doing. And I think that's mirrored in colleges across the country. And because of the fact that whether it's social media, whether it's just, online communication more generally, people just have more access to information these days, right? And so you can see and hear about the injustices that are happening there in ways that you simply couldn't before. Look, we know, you can go back, right? This isn't new. The reason that Emmett Till is such an important person in the civil rights movement, and his death and his funeral was such an important moment, was because people literally saw something that they hadn't seen before.
Right.
And so now we've accelerated that. And so you see things like Jacob, like you hear, the stories of people like Breonna Taylor, and, we need to make sure that the murderers of Breonna Taylor as a nation, we should be calling out to make sure that they are held to account and they are brought into custody and they are tried for what they did as well.
Thank you. We have a caller on the air. Caller?
My name is Paul Simmons.
Hey, good morning, Paul. How are you today, man?
All right.
Good.
It's good to see the work you folks have been doing in terms of all this stuff. But as you know from proper conversations, my big concern is still accountability. Not in terms of what David is doing, but just across the board, because a lot of times we deal with external definitions of our problems. And as a result, the problems tend to persist. And I've seen a lot of black history over the past, particularly since BLM came out. And nobody talks about the community control movements of the 60s and 70s.
Right. Okay.
And so we have external definition, external administration, and externally derived metrics. How do we need justice and bring it back to something that's accountable? In the same sense, how do we bring back permanent political structures officers at the neighborhood level to keep all these policies accountable.
Absolutely. Well, and Paul, thank you so much for your call and for your question. I think, this is a conversation that I am part of as a continuum, both as a citizen here, as a black man in the city, and as I was as a candidate, talking very publicly about the need for a much more robust, civilian oversight board for not just, in my opinion, not just Boston Police, but all public safety aspects here in the city. But I'm not the genesis of that idea. It was something that I was carrying forward and through conversations, and a lot of people, people like Jamal Crawford, who's involved in the conversation right now around that. And I'm glad that the city is making progress on that, but it's not enough.
Right.
And we need to get there. We need to have, a blue ribbon commission is not enough. We need blue ribbon reports that lead to blue ribbon policies that lead to blue ribbon impacts in our communities and on our streets. Right. So I think to the conversation around how we define that information, that's a part of it. Right. And we as a community have to be a critical and integral part of what that definition looks like when we define, it can't just be somebody sitting up in a policy shop in the 5th floor of City Hall or somebody up at the State House. It has to be grounded in their work, or connected with the work of people actually living the experience on a day-to-day basis here in our communities and on our streets. So that's critically important.
Is that good enough for you, Paul?
Well, it gets a little deeper than that.
Okay.
In the case, for an example, of definition.
Okay.
And we have a lot of external analyses of the Senate race. And without going into denigrating either candidate, you see the results being defined purely from an external perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And you would never know, for an example, that the black community, majority Latino, majority Asian gateway cities went for Kennedy. And so what you have is an ideological construct where people of color in general and black people in particular are simply excluded from the model.
Well, Paul, I would say this. I think that part of it is this. You have to be, as many other much more prominent and smart people than me have said, you got to be at the table if you don't want to be on the table, right? And
on the menu,
absolutely,
and eating up.
Absolutely. And I think part of how these conversations are defined, your point to external definitions is if you don't have people that are within a community as part of that conversation, right? And that's reflective of not just candidates and elected office holders, but as Ron and I've talked about often, staff members, of the commentators, of the people running the campaigns. You need to have people that represent these communities at all aspects, engage, and not just in a token fashion, right? We talked about this. I talked about this last year, and I harp on it because it's real. There's a strong and real difference between tokenism and representation. And tokenism.
Explain that one.
Tokenism is it's a mascot. Tokenism is just putting somebody there because you can check a box and say, I got this one.
Right.
Right. Representation is, can you do this work? Can you engage in these conversations and these policy developments and what have you in real substantive ways that really contribute? And parallel to that, are you bringing a perspective that is either completely absent or is woefully underrepresented at that table?
Right.
And if you can say yes to both of those things, that, in my opinion, is true representation. And when we have representation in these, different corridors of power and these different ways of making these definitions, we will see the definitions change by their very nature. And that's why it's so important to have, places and voices like Boston Praise Radio, like Boston Black News, right? To make sure that we have the ability to put our voice out there in real and authentic ways.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul, for your call. I know you're in Pennsylvania out there. How is it out there as far as the voter activity?
Voter activity, except on the Trump side, is minimal.
In what way? I mean, it's no activity or at all?
What I'm seeing are a lot of Republicans doing everything up to and including door to door. On the Democratic side, I see crickets chirping. Now, Dan, I'm not going to bore you or your listeners.
That's a battleground. That's a battleground state, Pennsylvania, and the Republicans are very active.
Right. As a result of which, Biden's numbers have dropped 9 points. That's the lead as he has is within the margin of error.
Wow.
Well, you know what they say about Pennsylvania is Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and Alabama and between them. So,
the problem is that Pittsburgh is not the region.
Okay. Okay, we'll have that. We'll have that discussion another time. Thank you, man. We appreciate you calling in, Paul. We'll check in later because I do want to talk to you more about Pennsylvania. Okay, 617-282-0685. We're in the studio with David Halbert. He is the outreach manager for the Educational Justice Institute at Massachusetts Institute of Technology on Massachusetts Avenue. Is that pretty good?
77 Massachusetts Avenue, in fact.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm okay.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so we're having this conversation. We talked about education. We talked about returning citizens. We talked about a lot, your political career, and you did not give us, you are thinking about putting your hat.
I am.
Okay, that's good. I just want to turn our attention to the Boston Public Schools, all right? Should these students go back to school?
No.
Good.
I mean, I don't just say that off the cuff. I'm a Boston Public Schools parent.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
And my daughter, I will refrain from telling you what school she goes to, but I will say it is a school here in the community.
Right.
We live here in Dorchester. Her school's in Mattapan, and it's a wonderful school, and we are happy that she's there, and she got incredible enrichment and support and education last year in her first year as a student, and it breaks my heart a little bit, right?
Yeah.
As her dad, that she's not going to be able to go back and see her friends and see her teachers and just have that experience that every kid should have.
Right.
But our first priority as parents, as adults, needs to be safety of our children, and then through them safety of our community. And we don't know enough about this, quite frankly.
Right.
People, there were some people who were like, I can't believe you're going to be on radio. You don't go anywhere.
Right.
It's true. But the reason is because, and I say this understanding that I speak from a place of profound gratitude for the privilege that I have to be able to do things like work from home.
Right.
And that is not everybody, particularly in our community where we have more essential services and essential workers. We've lived in Dorchester for a number of years now. Prior to that, my wife and I lived in East Boston for nearly 14 years.
Yeah, you did well in East Boston, right?
You did okay.
You did pretty good.
And and shout out to my friends Adrian Bernaro
and
Joe Boncory.
Yeah, you got to build it up, David.
That's what it's all about.
I'm trying to help you out here now.
I know. I'm looking for the assists. So.
You can slam dunk it.
There we go.
Boom shakalaka.
But in communities, communities of color, we've seen these numbers that are just for a host of reasons, going through the roof and continuing in ways that are very different. And we're seeing it's not that this is showing a new divide. We all knew these divides were here. Right. It's just exacerbating it. And so, thinking about our schools, where we have a Boston public school system of 54,000 students that is predominantly Black and Latino, where we are putting, kids in buildings that don't have proper ventilation for the most part, that are old, that can be deemed as sick buildings, and we're going to make them sicker. And all these kids are going to get together with one another, and somebody is going to have it, and they're going to give it to somebody else, and they're going to take it home to their parents, to their grandparents, to their neighbors, what have you, and we're only going to make the situation worse. And I understand, the desire, believe me, as a parent of a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, I understand the desire to have them be able to be in a place where they can be academically engaged and enriched, but also allow you to do some things that you need to do.
Right.
But at the same time, we can just see what's happening at the colleges. Yeah. Right? And we can see these parties and these events. We can see what happened here on Talbot.
There you go.
Just the other day.
But we're going to hold that for the next broadcast.
Okay. We're going to hold that up. Okay. We're going to hold that up.
Okay.
But I will say, once again, just from the standpoint of being a parent, that there are some kids who are going to have to be in schools, right? Because they're special needs students and they need to have that direct interaction in order to continue their educational growth and development. Or their families just have no options and they have to be in a school.
You know what? I'm going to have you come back.
Okay.
Because you got so much to say. You got so much information.
I talk too much. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm enjoying it. I'm really enjoying it. That's why you need to run again. And you said you're going to run again. We want to thank you for this broadcast. www.bostonpraiseradio.tv.co. If you're interested in supporting Boston Black News, you can go to our Cash App, BPRTV. I know David's going to give us a check too, and all my guests is going to give us a check because we support Black News, don't we, David?
Yes, we do.
But so therefore, you see Renee on your way out. So we're really excited about this. We're going to keep on pushing. I'm back. That's right. We're going to raise some money for this station, and I'm going to show David the space. Come on. Next broadcast, we have Ed Gaston, who is the director of the Greater Grove Hall Main Streets. Be right back.
Right.